live on the internet.
I am thrilled to be here with you.
Just like before, but different,
Okay.
How you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. I'm thrilled to be here and talking with you about drowning prevention in the world and without.
And using your voice, which is what we were talking about, is right behind you,
Exactly. Use your voice. We were saying, and again, I had a very talented young woman who lived with me doing some school, and she took one of my favorite phrases and put it up, and it inspires me because if we in drowning prevention are not using our voices to speak out to not just our field, but the rest of the public, it doesn't matter how good our work is. If it's not being heard, it's not being used, and then people are still drowning. So yes, I'm committed to using my voice.
So you started out, and I may be wrong, but you started out doing research, right?
I did.
Was that the beginning?
I did. And it's a different sort of research. I actually come from a business and marketing and social psychology standpoint. So my background is all consulting. And then when I learned about drowning, I thought somebody came to me with a product idea, actually. And I thought, well, I'll help you out. I'll write a business plan for you. And then I kept researching and I thought, this is ridiculous. This is a global epidemic. And 11 years ago, hardly anybody was talking about it. There are the people in this field who've been doing this for decades who are unbelievably dedicated to it and have done great work, but it still didn't have the recognition. It's people like Steve Bierman and Justin Scarr who took it to Bloomberg, and finally got heard by them. And then Bloomberg, thank goodness, agreed to go to the World Health to sponsor a report by the World Health Organization. So, drowning was only declared an epidemic in 2014 because of the work of people like that. So I entered it from a research standpoint of not necessarily like what swimming lessons work or what pool fences are the best ones. That is not my area of expertise. But where I do come at from is why aren't people aware of drowning? It's not being marketed correctly. People don't know that they want to know about drowning. We tend to push. We push saying, you really need to know about this. It's dangerous. You're going to die. Your child's going to die. And yet people aren't pulling the information to them. And if you market something, you pull the information. I want to know about water safety. I want to know how I keep my child safe. And it's not because people don't care about their children. We know that. So figuring out, doing the research into what were the issues, where are drownings occurring? But most of all, why do we have a global epidemic and people, it's not like on every news channel all the time. And so that started off my in-depth research. And because my interest has always been advocacy for children, and also I've always had a global interest, I've looked at it from how does it all tie together from country to country. So, I always come out, the best thing about my work, hands down, is one, if I do my job right, kids don't die. And two, I work with the coolest people on the planet, literally all over the planet. So it's hard hearing the stories, but I feel like the dedication of the people in the field that I'm working with, that I see every single day, keeps me going because it gives me hope. I'm like, all right, we've got the information. We know how to prevent drowning. We just have to break out of our silo and get the information out there.
And I think that's really important, and I think that the global approach you're taking is important. Obviously we have a lot of drownings in the U.S.
Yes.
The number of drownings we have in the U.S. are dwarfed compared to the number of drownings in a lot of second and third world countries.
It's less than 1%.
Yeah.
I think that's a statistic which it's really hard for people to wrap their head about.
Sure.
In the as people in drowning prevention know, in the U.S., drowning kills more 1 to 4-year-olds than anything else except birth defects.
Right.
And even in the U.S., people who work in drowning are staggered by that. And then if you so drowning's the third leading cause of unintentional injury death globally. And the United States, for the epidemic we have here, it is less than 1% of the current global death toll. And 59% of World Health Organization members don't count drowning as a cause of death. And so they estimate that the actual toll, which right now is officially 380,000 a year, is conservatively between 5 and 10 times higher than that.
Wow.
Yeah. So you're probably conservatively talking over 3 million people a year dying of drowning. And that does not include people who drown in floods, in tsunamis, when a ferry overturns, the duck boat in Minneapolis, that's not going to be drowning deaths. That's going to be a transportation accident.
Right.
So, yeah, it is an enormous global problem. I mean, I think one of the great things about being here in the United States is the organizations within the United States that have come up with ways of dealing with drowning, of preventing drowning. Those can be rolled out in other places. Australia, the UK, top of the heap in terms of what they're doing. Brazil is doing an awesome job. Portugal, I could go on. Ireland, Roger Sweeney in Ireland is just doing an amazing job with his, and Ross McLeod at RNLI in the UK. Fantastic, fantastic material they're putting out on radio, on TV, on YouTube, on 30-second clips. There's just a lot of really exciting stuff happening.
So what are some of the things that, I know what Australia is doing, but what's happening in, say, UK?
The UK, you've got two major large organizations. So you have Royal Life Saving Society UK, which there's a number of Royal Life Saving Societies.
I know the Australian and Canada one.
That's right. Also, and they've also got the Commonwealth, which covers all the Commonwealth countries. And then you have RNLI, the Royal National Lifeboat Institute, and they're all doing similar but different things. So RNLI started with, if you're a sailor in the UK, you really love the RNLI because if you're in trouble, it's their volunteers who are out rescuing you.
Gotcha.
So they do a lot of actually the open water rescue stuff, but they do a lot of education. Like I said, I'm really impressed with the campaigns that Ross McLeod has put out, the hashtag Respect the Water. He's done a great one, really powerful video talk about what to happen with basically cold water, the float on your back, the starfish. But there's also a lot of the smaller organizations within the UK as well. And one of the ones that I really admire the work she's doing is Debbie Ann in Wales with River and Sea Sense. And her son drowned fell off into a waterfall. And she has just dedicated the last 10 years to raising awareness. She's gone around and spoken to well over 100,000 school children in Wales. She has been tireless. She was a national lottery winner for the amount of time and effort she has put into this to give a face to the issue. And she's now going to Ireland to speak at one of the main academic conferences that happens in Ireland every year with drowning prevention. So the UK has, they're surrounded by water. They have less drowning rates than the US, but we're much bigger than they are. But they've got two major organizations that are really dedicated to doing this. And again, Royal Life Saving was very active. The Royal Life Saving organizations have been very active in trying to get a higher level of involvement, like from the World Health Organization. RNLI, huge credit to them because they just hired an advocacy person whose name just went right out of my head. I can see her. But got the United Nations. They have a photo exhibition at the United Nations just in the last month pushing drowning. They have, I believe, 5 ambassadors on board for signing a United Nations resolution about drowning. So if anybody wants to do anything, call your ambassador and ask them to please have your country support that United Nations resolution to acknowledge drowning as a major problem.
That's really cool. And, I always assumed that other countries were doing things, similar to what we were doing. But it's nice to hear that, they might be doing a better job than we are. It actually reassures me, I could be upset by that, but actually it's kind of nice to know that, someone else is doing a better job than we are, I know. Well,
it's great because then we can learn from them,
right.
And we can use their stuff. I admit it. I'm regularly poaching whatever RNLI and Irish Water Safety put out. Any video they're putting out, chances are you're going to see on my Facebook feed because it is such high quality. And just because the accents might be Irish or British, right. It doesn't matter. I live near Chicago. Lake Michigan is one of the Great Lakes, the 5 Great Lakes, and 4 of those Great Lakes have very serious rip currents. And Lake Michigan, where I am close to, has the worst rip currents. And so when I see information coming out of Australia, like Dr. Rob Brander, Dr. Rip, that went onto the National Geographic site, I'm putting it out there because just because the rip currents, the ocean does not know where it is. the ocean does not know that it's supposed to belong to Australian accents or British accents or Irish accents or Brazilian accents or American accents. The water goes where it wants. So if I know how to get out of rip current with an Australian accent, I know how to get out of rip current in Lake Michigan.
No, it makes a lot of sense. So you must be familiar with Bob Pratt with the Great Lakes Surf Rescue. Yeah, no, he's awesome. He's a good friend of mine.
Yeah, and he, I think, is becoming very active, unfortunately. Yeah, that's the hard thing about our field is when you get sudden media attention, right. Unfortunately, it's because somebody died.
Yeah.
And we had we've had a number of drownings in Lake Michigan this summer. We always do. But a 13-year-old died in Rogers Park on the north side of the city in a rip current right after the lifeguards had gone home. The red flags were up. And I know Bob Pratt's been speaking about that. Dave Benjamin's been speaking about that. They're trying to get a Chicago Water Safety Task Force up, which I'm pushing to be on it. Let's hope it goes because we need it. You know, drowning is a huge problem in Chicago, and I don't have the numbers. I'm having trouble getting them. But I suspect non-fatal drownings in Chicago with the rip currents are even higher. And then you start getting the attention of policymakers because you start talking non-fatal drowning and you're talking real money.
Oh, yeah. Lifetime care,
exactly.
Permanent disability.
I know. And sadly, it'd be great to say kids are dying, you should help and get in line with every other cause. But the minute you start saying lifetime care, permanent brain damage, this is how much it's costing the insurance companies, the hospitals, the states, then you're going to start getting some attention.
If you did get involved with the Chicago Drowning Prevention Task Force, that would be an interesting flip to what you usually do, because you usually try to keep it pretty international. And, I know you try to keep your focus global and not, on the US. So it'd be interesting for you to do the global and then the local right in Chicago,
It would be. It will be interesting. And I'm the first to admit that if they aren't actually accomplishing anything, right. I'm either going to blow up or I'm out of there, because I'm not interested in just showing up to have my name on something. Yeah. Just so we can all meet and feel good about ourselves. We're talking about water safety. We feel good about ourselves. I don't have time for that. Yeah. If Chicago is an awesome city. Chicago is my hometown. I've lived in 3 other countries, but here I am back in Chicago. And I love Lake Michigan. My mom grew up in Rogers Park, literally a block away from where that girl drowned. And I think Chicago has a history of being aggressive and trying new things. It's interesting. You see that in our architecture. You see that in our theater. Little known fact, but a lot of the shows that end up big on Broadway in New York started in Chicago to see if they were going to go. Oh, so wow. Chicago has a history of getting the avant-garde, of trying things out, of taking a risk. We take a risk architecturally with Frank Lloyd Wright and Helmut Jahn and, our skyline. We take a risk with theater. We take a risk with our music festivals and the diversity of restaurants we have. And so I think that if Chicago, the Park District, the fire department, the Chicago Public Schools, the after-school programs, the neighborhood programs, the faith-based organizations, if we can pull them all together, I think that the personality type that Chicago has could create a culture of water safety that basically would create a template for other cities to pick up. So I'm very optimistic that if Chicago does commit to this, our personality, our heritage, I think have a chance of making a real difference. Yeah, so that's why I'm willing to go local.
Yeah, and because you're right, that local role model, hopefully would ripple into other, places, especially in areas that aren't necessarily considered, sunshine states, right?
Right.
It's one thing when Florida and California and Arizona, they have a water safety initiative because people expect it, right? Like, Of course Florida is doing it. Yeah. But if Chicago does it, then that's a whole different thing,
Yeah. And again, you point out there's a lot, people know, they're like, oh yes, you've got the drownings, as you said, in Florida and California and Arizona and stuff. Montana has a really high drowning rate. Who knew that? I mean, I didn't, but I know most people don't. Why would you?
I didn't, yeah.
I know, But Montana has a really high drowning rate because Montana has stunning outdoors, stunning nature. And so the lifestyle there is around the hunting and the fishing and the whitewater rafting and the floating. And it's a lot of open water, and it can be a lot of very cold open water as well. So yeah, Montana has very high drowning rates and nobody talks about it. So yes, if Chicago can do it, and yes, we have Lake Michigan right there, but people don't think about it because it's not a pool.
Right.
People think if it's drowning, it must be a pool. But
or an ocean, right?
Or an ocean, yeah.
An ocean, And I think you're right. If we can get something like that, that could really be a neat model for other states that aren't necessarily branded as water areas to make a change.
I agree. And again, I would very much. Chicago has been a leader in so many areas, sometimes bad areas, but in a lot of good areas, I would like to see Chicago take the lead. I think that, like I said, we have the personality, we have the historical heritage to create something innovative that really works, that's cost effective.
You sent me a paper you wrote a few years ago, and it was on a multi-generational change to drowning prevention. So essentially, yes. Imprinting in kids from a very early age and even from prior generations that, water safety is important, the rules for, being around water, always swimming with a buddy. And, I think you had a few general rules that you wanted to get across. And I thought that was an interesting idea that you don't hear a lot about,
Yeah. And I think it's at the crux of all the work I do. And the example I always give to people is that if you're going to have water safety stick in somebody's head because young child are at very high risk. Well, how do you teach a child to walk across the street safely? You don't tell them once. You tell them over and over again. You show them the exaggerated look both ways,
right.
Before you cross the street, until it becomes imprinted. And that's really what we have to do with water safety, starting from the first bath. Children are in water when they are in utero. And when they come out and they have the first bath, if you have a child, if you've seen a baby being born, being bathed, there's like that startle. And then there's like almost a relax. And when my children were young and it was a rough day, throw them in the bath or go for a swim because that water just takes the edge off. It's a very positive relationship. But that positive relationship then can translate to a toddler wanting off to enjoy that on their own and finding the unfenced pool, or a child with special needs or especially autism feeling that comfort, that hug of water. So that's why autistic children have significantly higher drowning rates. And so if we start from literally the minute a child is born with talking with them and showing them proper water safety, how to interrelate with water positively and respectfully and safely, then it becomes imprinted. And so when you become a parent, there's no manual that says, you really need to teach your child to cross the street safely. It's just something that is so ingrained with you that you automatically do it. And so if you are doing that with water safety as well, then over time, if my bet is correct, my model, within one generation, we would see a significant and permanent drop in drowning rates because it would be embedded in the culture. And I think what's fascinating is that in many different countries, including the United States, because in the United States, American Indians, American Eskimos, the Native Americans have the highest drowning rates by a long shot. The Maori in New Zealand, the Aboriginals in Australia, this holds true in Canada. Also, the First Nations people have extremely high drowning rates. But where they have been successful in incorporating water safety is when they go into the culture and they talk about how the cultures have revered water, the relationship that the tribes have had with water for generations. When they start bringing that and incorporating that back, then you start seeing an openness to learning about water safety, to learning about drowning prevention, because people are reclaiming their culture. And then it's becoming indoctrinated. It's becoming internalized. So just as we learn to cross the street safely, you learn to relate to the water safely. And so I'm glad you brought it up. That idea that from birth onwards, we need to be starting now teaching new parents how to relate to their newborn. And as they grow, and then you get them into swimming lessons, and then you teach them how to act as a teenager, and the safe boating and all that other sort of stuff. By doing that, we're creating a generation who will then automatically pass that information on.
So if you had to pick a, look both ways before crossing the street message for water safety that got ingrained for kids, what would it be?
Oh, that's a tough one. And I'm supposed to know that off the top of my head. And that's one of the challenges, actually, because look both ways you cross the street. You can sum that up into one pretty thing.
Stop, drop, and roll. That's a.
Yeah. The one I came up with was, and this is not something you would teach a child, but it's something that we need to be teaching the adults so that they are passing on, because there isn't going to be. That's the difficulty. That's the complexity of our issues. There's not just one message. Right. There are different messages related to don't leave a baby in the bath, always swim near a lifeguard, wear a life jacket if you're a weak swimmer or if you're on a boat. There's so many different ways that we have to, turn tubs over if you're not using them. So many different ways. So back at the beginning, what I came up with was teach, watch, and protect. So, and this would be for parents, so they start teaching. And then don't let me forget consistent messages, because that's really important. But the teach your child about water safety, basically from birth until they are 18. If you're teaching them a little bit every year, kind of building on it, right, you're going to leave them better prepared. Watch child. As we all know, with very young children, they need to be watched very closely, touch supervision. And then protect. So protect would be learn CPR. Especially learn CPR, have them put a life jacket on, put the pool fencing, the independently four-sided pool fencing, freestanding. But also within those, if all of us in the drowning prevention field start using consistent messaging when we're talking in our messaging, and I'm very pleased to say Water Safety USA, all of the members of that, so the Red Cross, the YMCA, the Boy Scouts, Safe Kids, the American Academy of Pediatrics, they have all committed to using consistent messaging. And that consistent messaging was developed by an international task force. It's the International Open Water Guidelines. Best place to probably find it is on the Seattle Children's Hospital website. But when we have every organization, every person who's working on drowning prevention in the United States use the same words, then it will go in. And the analogy I use there is, if you're driving along and you see a light that's red, what do? You stop. Yeah. If you see that, what is it, a hexagon, octagon?
Octagon, yeah.
You stop, because you don't have to stop and read it. It's so ingrained because that's what you've been hearing over and over. If it's a red light, stop. If it's a red light, stop. If it's a red light, stop. So when we say, always swim near a lifeguard, I'm probably messing up the words, and everybody always says, always swim near a lifeguard, always swim near a lifeguard, not swim when a lifeguard is on present, swim when a lifeguard is on duty, check to see where the lifeguard is on duty, check to see if there's a lifeguard in the lifeguard house. Why don't you check and see what the flags do? The message gets muddied, and the public doesn't hear it because it's muddied. But if every single person commits to saying, always swim near a lifeguard, always swim near a lifeguard, always swim near a lifeguard, eventually it gets in and people are like, oh, look around, always swim near a lifeguard, let's go near the lifeguard station. And so that using consistent words is extremely important if we're going to communicate to the public and turn it into internalized behavioral change so that it's sustainable.
I was thinking about my own question after I asked it. And I think if I had to pick one, it would probably be something along the lines of, always swim with a buddy, or never go in the pool alone, or always, be with someone in the water, Yeah. I think you can teach that to someone real young.
Yes.
And if you can ingrain it, really well, then, you might stop a toddler who's walking out towards the backyard and like, oh, wait, I'm by myself,
Exactly.
All the way to adulthood, you've got 16-year-olds, who might be reckless and going swimming, but if they have it in their head, like, oh, I shouldn't be in the water alone. And even adults, I know way too many stories of adults who drowned, who were excellent swimmers, who, got sick or had a cramp or, some kind of medical issue. while swimming by themselves
Yeah.
and ended up drowning,
Yeah.
So, I think, that messaging is good for a lifetime. And
I agree. And I believe it's on, the International Open Water Safety Guidelines. And I think one of the things that you make an outstanding point on that's also stuff that a young child understands.
Right.
That swim near a buddy. I mean, you start them off in preschool. What do? They line them up with a buddy when you're going anywhere.
Right.
You see preschoolers, they're all holding hands with their buddy. So that is a great way of using something which a very young child understands, and even a child younger than preschool age, because their buddy is usually their parent.
Right.
They aren't going anywhere without their parent generally.
Hopefully.
So if you start that, hopefully. And if they do, that's when we start having the accidents. Yeah. But yeah, that's a great message to carry forward starting from a very young age.
So, you were talking before how, this isn't on the news all the time and it just doesn't get the coverage that it deserves. Why do you think that is?
Lack of marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lack of marketing, lack of lobbying. And I think that comes mostly from a lack of a concerted effort. And I am very encouraged at the change that I've seen in 11 years. 11 years ago, there were a lot of organizations doing their own thing. And as I've gone to the global, the World Conference on Drowning Prevention, in Vietnam and Germany and Vancouver, you started seeing that shift from individual organizations to a lot of collaborations. So, and in that 11 years, you've seen the Families United Against Drowning. So the family foundations, I think there's over 40 of them banding together saying, all right, we're more powerful as one entity. And that sort of mentality is growing within the drowning prevention community on a global level. I see an enormous amount of collaboration. I've got Isla from California going to Nicaragua, and I've got, Stathis in Greece working with, the people in Ireland on stuff. And I've got Josh Project in Ohio talking with Life Saving Society Canada to incorporate their survival swim. So there's a lot of collaboration going on. And the more we commit to doing that, and that includes sharing each other's information, then we're going to start become a large enough entity that we have lobbying power. We have marketing power. And I always feel like the worst sort of person. And so this isn't me, it's just, this is reality. But when you have high profile drownings, when you have a drowning that does, for one brief news flash, make the national news, we as a global and as a national drowning prevention community need to be rising up as one voice going, you're right, drowning is a problem and here's what you do. Here's where it is on all these websites, this same information. And if everybody all over the country is like, yes, that child died and that is a tragedy, and this happens to children whose parents are not famous every single day. And so look at the consistent messages that all of us have on our website. And if you're in Texas, go look at Collins Hope. And if you're in California, go look at, the Drowning Prevention Network. And if you're in, go look at the Joshua Collingsworth Foundation. It's in your community, rather than just say, I've got my little thing right here. But if we are all speaking as one voice, then we will have consistent attention from the press. We will be able to start pushing it. And if we start pushing it, it's not just the press. The press is kind of a minor thing. Shiny object, one day, boom, it's gone the next. But what we need is the ears of the legislatures, because we need funding at state and federal levels. And we also need to start being able to get into the foundations. I'm sure that anybody out there who's operating a nonprofit, who's, Googled, which foundations fund drowning prevention, nothing, zero. That's because we are not lobbying as an entity to get on their radar. It's a large part of what I do, and again, kudos to especially Dr. Steve Bierman and Justin Scarr, out of Canada and Australia, for doing the hard slog to get in front of Bloomberg Philanthropies. That took years. But that's what we need to do. We need to be acting as one entity, as one big booming voice, sharing information with each other, sharing each other's information so that we start getting the media attention, the public attention, the funding. We've got to have the funding. We can't do anything without money.
So, what made you decide to do this full time?
It was a calling.
Yeah.
I sort of feel like when you've been tapped on the shoulder and said, this is basically what you've prepared for your whole life, it's kind of stupid to turn around and say, I don't feel like it today.
Right.
My whole life, I have been an advocate for children. That goes back, and you can see it in a lot of different ways, volunteering for the Adoption Information Center, doing tutoring, working in the nursery with newborns, a lot of addicted newborns and stuff. Now I'm very active in scouting. I do a lot of mentoring of young people, which I really like. So that advocacy for children has been a common theme throughout my life. And I try to do advocacy on a global level too. In case anybody was wondering, the United Nations is the only country who has not signed off on the United Nations human rights of a child.
You said the United Nations, so I'm guessing you mean the United States?
The United States is the only country in the world that has not signed, has not ratified the United Nations Treaty on the Rights of a Child.
Really?
Really.
Why?
Call your congressman today. Everybody, call your congressman today and say, why hasn't the United States ratified the United Nations Human Rights of a Child? Because that has, I don't know why. I don't know why. I've been trying to find that out for years. And there's all sorts of, the United States wants to go their own way. That has implications for drowning prevention. If we say that the rights of a child are not valuable, that we alone as a country, the only country on earth, refuses to ratify that, that says we don't value the life of a child. And that has implications for our field. So anyways, my advocacy all the way through, because I get all excited about these things and then go off. My background is unusual, and it makes me really uniquely qualified to look at a complex global issue. So I have over a decade of consulting experience, and typically the projects that I would be handed, especially towards the end of my consulting career, were the big, ugly, all right, we got boxes full of stuff and financial forms, and we have no idea what they mean. And I would go in, and 3 weeks later, I'd come out with a binder going, all right, this is how you track all the money. Right. And this is what you need to do to fund all the accounts. So that mentality of analysis and I guess investigation are something that comes naturally, but I've also had professional training. Then my first master's is from Kellogg School of Management. That's in international. So my draw towards international management, marketing, and then economics. And so that speaks to the fact that we need to market the issue, but we also need to do it in a cost-effective way. We can't just say we have a great idea, people throw money at it. That does not work. I want to see bottom line results. I want to see things that are cost-effective and sustainable. And then as a result of my consulting and the work that I did in my first master's, I thought plans are interesting. Financial documents, statistics, I adore statistics. They're one of my favorite things. But if people aren't willing to implement them, you have nothing. You just have a good idea. And so I went and got my second master's from London School of Economics in organizational and social psychology. And I did a lot of work there on issues related to gender and group dynamics in particular. Because, like I said, you can have the best plan in the world. You can have a business plan and your financials all stack up and it looks brilliant and your statistics are awesome. They're so convincing. But if you can't convince people to change your behavior, you don't have anything. And so that background that I have, which really comes out to almost by definition, social marketing, which is social marketing is not social media. Social marketing is how do you use market forces to change behavior for public good? And so rather than convincing you to drink either Pepsi or Coke, I'm convincing you to change your behavior and your attitudes and your behavior around water. And so all of that past history of mine came up. And when I first learned about drowning and agreed to write that first business plan, it was like, boom, wow, this is a major global problem. And I can do something about it. I have the skills. I have the background. I have, like I said, I've lived in 3 other countries I've traveled to, I don't know how many. I can do something about this. And so that's why I'm here every single day, whether and some days I wake up and I'm like, I'm not doing anything. I'm not accomplishing anything. What's the point? And then I turn on the computer and I get right back to it. Because I have enough days where people call going, I changed what I was doing because of something you wrote. And this is how it has changed things in my country.
When you first got started 11 years ago, did you think it was going to be an easier problem to solve than it's turned out to be?
Absolutely. First of all, I thought I'd be in and out in 3 months. And with the hubris that I frequently see, and I have a lot of sympathy with now, with people who are new to the field or who have recently lost a child, they look at it and they think, well, this is obvious. There's obvious solutions.
We can fix this.
It.
I'm going to start an organization to make sure this never happens to anybody else. Finally, someone's going to do something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was that person. I'm like, I have awesome degrees. I can fix this. And it's complex. It is complex. So no, I did not think I would still be doing it for this long. I do think that the organization that I've started now, Make the Minute Matter, our focus is we raise awareness, we provide education, and we raise funding for skills-based training program. And that's an important differentiation. We are not offering a skills-based training program. What our goal is basically to be the funnel to raise awareness with the foundations, the legislature, the people with the money, the public, and create a demand for that information. And then I have, like I said at the beginning, I work with the coolest people in the world. So all of you out there, in my truly expansive global network, I think I probably have one of the best, largest global networks in the world in our field. I can then funnel money. I can funnel attention to all of them through my organization. And so I'm a conduit. What I've done is realize I'm not going to be the expert on swimming. I'm not going to be the expert on pool fencing. I'm not going to be the expert on life jackets. That's not my field. What I am good is at connecting. And so raising awareness, marketing the issue, and then connecting the people who want to make a difference with the resources in their community. So if you contact my organization and say, I used to live in Sri Lanka. I just have, I have such a deep relationship with that country. I know, they have problems. Can you help me? And I'm like, yes, I know the organization there. It's Christina Fanfes, I Can Swim, Can You? And she's doing amazing work. And I can help. I can either direct you right there, or we will fund them through my organization. And at that point, this critical thing, I also can collect the data. So if I'm collecting data from all the organizations that we are funding, then I'm creating a pool of data that makes it harder for foundations and legislatures and the United Nations to ignore. Like I said earlier, 59% of World Health Organization members don't count drowning as a cause of death. So we don't have the statistics to compete with AIDS or malaria or cholera or anything, trying to think of what a guinea worm.
Right. Yeah.
So that's also part of what my organization was built to fill in the gaps and create a consolidated effort, basically to create a giant spotlight onto all the organizations working in drowning prevention.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that, knowing exactly, kind of what your niche is important. Mm-hmm. Yes. Because I see a lot of organizations that are kind of shotgunning everything. They're trying to do all things for all people. Yeah. And I think that's destined for failure. I think if you kind of know your laser beam focus, you have a much higher chance of, achieving the goals that you set forward for yourself. Mm-hmm. So we were talking before we got started that I noticed that you rebranded to Make the Minute Matter. So first, why the name? Actually, that came over a bottle of champagne with friend.
And full credit to Cindy Hanlon. Cindy is on our board. Actually, I would really encourage people to go to maketheminuteMatter.org and look at our board and look at our advisory board. Because I think those two things really speak to the commitment of the organization. But Cindy and I, she's a friend of mine. She lives here. Her daughter's the same age as mine. We were sitting around having a glass of champagne. And I had crunched a bunch of numbers and said, realistically, we can say one child drowns every minute. And I'm like, In 1 minute, the process of drowning begins. In 5 minutes, brain damage. In 10 minutes, death. And it is a matter of minutes to start teaching people, you have to put in an independent freestanding four-sided fence, the life jackets, the sign up for swimming lessons. I said, we are literally talking, stuff that takes minutes to do. And Cindy is, when I say she's an expert in marketing and branding, that does not do her justice. She is the one who teaches people like Coke and Pepsi how to market. She's currently working for Tyson Foods, teaching them how to market. That's her job, is inside, branding development and marketing and teaching people. And she's like, make the minute matter. I'm like, boom, goosebumps. That's it. And I get a lot of, well, if you're going to be in drowning prevention, you should have something about drowning prevention in your name. And I'm like, yes, but if you look at how you change attitudes and behaviors, it's positive changes. People don't change for negative things. The negative messages, they may do for as long as you're watching them, to say, basically, do that, or, you're going to get in trouble. And as soon as they leave the room, they're going to go do whatever they want to do. But positive changes in attitudes and behavior become sustainable, becomes internalized. Like we were saying, that look both ways before you cross the street. So the same thing applies to water safety, drowning prevention. If we want to get people's attention, parents are bombarded with stuff. They don't want to hear one more thing they have to do, because otherwise their child is going to die. And so what we're trying to do is break it down into, if you have a minute, you have a minute. A minute can cause your child to die, but a minute can also save their life. And so creating a drowning prevention organization, and our logo does have the water drop. I love our logo. Credit to Ryan Politis, who did our logo and all of our, graphic design stuff. She took all of my words and thus came up with something wonderful. But that's why. It's to create an organization that is dedicated to ending drowning, but by doing it through positive, sustainable, and cost-effective behavioral change.
And I think that the positive approach is the right one. I even prefer, and it's still not completely positive, but I like water safety over drowning prevention all day, every day.
Yeah.
In fact, I was talking to an organization that had drowning prevention in its name, and I had recommended that they change it to water safety. I'd much rather you be the National Water Safety Association than drowning prevention. I think it makes a lot more sense. And I think people respond better to it. And water safety itself isn't even that positive. That's just one more step, from the bottom of the barrel,
Yeah, I know. And it's interesting. It's complex. I raised that same issue actually with Steve Bierman at the Vietnam conference a number of years ago. And I agree. If you look onto the website and you look at stuff I write, you see a lot about water safety, less than about drowning prevention, because one is more positive, proactive, learn about being safe around the water. One is you've got to prevent drowning. This is a difficult thing. But again, Steve pointed out they'd actually done focus groups and found, and I think this is especially true once you get outside of the United States, when you're in low and middle income countries, if you say water safety to people, it means clean water.
Right.
Or, flood prevention. And so that's understanding the population you're talking to as well. So, and that makes it more complex. I agree. I like using water safety. It's a positive thing. But at some point you have to tell them this is because you have to prevent drowning. So how do you find that balance? I don't know yet. You let me know when you found that. But it's a difficult one. And it's a very good point. To make the positive change, you need to draw people to something. You want people to request stuff. They want to learn about water safety. So we kind of have to, maybe it's a little bit of carrot and stick. You have to push them there a little bit with drowning prevention and then pull them in with, we can teach you water safety.
Maybe. So I'm guessing that if you're going to do this new organization that has a new spin from other organizations out there, so what does make the Minute Matter doing differently than other water safety organizations?
I would say the biggest differentiation is we are hardcore business focus. The business disciplines that are underlying the organization, and again, my board is extraordinary by anybody's definition, and so is my advisory board. And the board was created to intentionally create the perfect brain. basically. So I've got Cindy, who is an absolute expert in marketing and branding. Sharon Robinson is no relationship, but she's the chairman of our board. She is the senior vice president of Zurich Insurance, doing actuarial pricing. So she understands the statistics. We have Dr. Julie Gilchrist, who was most recently the medical epidemiologist at the Center for Disease Control. So Julie probably knows more about drowning statistics in the United States than anybody else. I've got Dan Graham, who knows more about rescue water and actually implementing good programs that are sustainable in low and middle income countries than anybody else. And he's out of Wales, or out of the UK. I've got Amy Davis. Amy has her law degree. She's got her master's in international relations from Cambridge, and she's got her master's in public health at Yale. And so hardcore researcher, but also understanding the intersection of international law and public health. And I've got Tian Bataille, who is an expert in corporate litigation, the big picture, the really complex banks too big to fail legal aspects of looking, and she has a real track record. She started up an organization in Chicago dedicated to ending human trafficking. She was on the board of an organization, a leadership committee, leadership foundation in India. She was involved in drafting the constitution for Nepal. So in addition to the legal, she brings some really high power nonprofit experience of actually launching. And I think that's one of the things that really differentiates in a very positive way Make the Minute Matter, is that intense business focus and bringing in the best brains that I could find in different disciplines. So listening to the conversations, you got a lot of people bring in different things. And so we were talking before the show started about the echo chamber. People in drowning, we all understand each other. We all use the same words. We all love each other most of the time. It's great. Well, try explaining what you do to somebody and I'm sorry, he just joined our board recently, Marco Liverio, father of 4 children and a banker at Chase. So he's our treasurer, so I've got somebody who's got 4 young children under 10 with a real, I really care about this, and the financial background to be looking at all of our financial stuff to make sure that we are doing this in a way that we're creating an organization that's financially sustainable. And so putting together that perfect brain intentionally, and also getting us out of the echo chamber. The only 2 people on that board who have direct knowledge of drowning prevention are Dan Graham and Julie Gilchrist. But I've got lots of expertise to pull on. If you look at the advisory board, which I believe I've got about 25 people from 6 continents. So, and these are people that are truly expert in their field. So I've got people I can draw on no matter what the issue is, saying, we have a question, or we're going into this country, or what do you know, or have you handled this? And basically I can reach out to anybody and find the answers that we don't have. So I think that's probably one of our best distinguishing factors, probably the one I'm most proud of, is the caliber of people who are involved, and the fact that I have intentionally included people who are experts in drowning prevention and people who are experts in their field, who bring a totally different perspective, who know nothing about drowning. So they challenge what we know. I've been in it now for too long in that I forget that other people don't know what I know. And that's dangerous. That's when you start saying things and people are like, whatever. And so to have that juxtaposition, I think, is very positive. And they're just totally awesome people.
Yeah, when you get a little too into the weeds, I was having an argument with somebody. I forget which one it was. It was probably, near drowning versus non-fatal drowning. It might have been even sillier than that. It might have been, what it was? It was drowning is the number 1 unintentional cause of death for children 1 to 4 versus drowning is the number 1 accidental cause of death for children 1 to 4. And, I'm, hearing this argument going on. And at one point I was like, who cares? And she's like, well, it's really important. I'm like, I'm sure it is, but not for me. I mean, it is for me because I'm in it.
Right.
But to your average mom, we're not saving any lives in this conversation.
I know. You're absolutely right.
In the hour we've been talking about this, 0 lives have been saved,
Yeah.
So I'm going to go do something that saves lives. And when you guys are done figuring out what you want me to say, let me know and I'll use the words you guys decide. But, I can't waste my time in this minutia,
I can't agree enough with that. Amplify it. That part, you should pull it out as a soundbite and just use it for our entire conversation. But I absolutely agree. That, yes, we can talk about the minutiae of what things should talk behind, but we also have to understand that that's not how the public is talking.
Right.
And we aren't speaking their language. We're speaking ancient Greek and they're speaking rap.
Right.
They're so far apart.
The fact that the water safety community will cannibalize and vilify each other for using the word near drowning, when that's the word that the entire rest of the world uses.
I know.
I will get shredded to pieces if I accidentally use that on our Facebook by us, by our community. But that's the words that the rest of the world use. I know. So
I have been shredded. I
remember I came to your defense not too long ago.
And I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And it was somebody I work with that, she's like, oh my God, I had a moment. I forgot. I'm like, I know, I do too. But the point is like, and when I sit down with people, like even going, talking to the banker, and what do? I work in drowning prevention. And she's like, I know all about that. Secondary drowning, dry drowning.
Right.
And, I've written about it extensively, on my blog. I'm like, this is why if the public wants to talk about it, we can use our words and their words, but we don't say, well, we're not going to talk about it unless you use the words we want you to use.
Right.
And that's what has happened. And so for instance, with the banker, the conversation I had was, that's right. A lot of people talk about secondary drowning or dry drowning. It's all drowning. It's all a process of drowning. So what I did is I used the correct terminology, but I acknowledged that, yes, she knew something, and she had children and she had grandchildren, and she wanted to know because she doesn't want her grandchildren to die of whatever we call it, dry drowning, secondary drowning, non-fatal drowning,
right?
The process of drowning.
Delayed drowning,
Yeah. So I could talk her through. She's like, well, how do I know? And so I talked her through, well, these are the symptoms. This is when you should go to the emergency room. This is, and also was able to do it in a calming sort of voice as well. But again, people within our field, and I think this is one of the biggest problems we have. This is probably the biggest thing that holds us back, is staying in our silo. And yes, the terms are incredibly important. And we need to be consistent, and we need to agree on them. And there needs to be medical and researched reasons behind them. But that shouldn't stop us from engaging the public in the words they use. I have a good example. I have like a really messed up shoulder from a couple of bad injuries on a sailboat. Mm-hmm. And every once in a while it acts up. I was doing some gardening and stuff. So I tell you, I have a messed up shoulder, right? Sure. You get it, don't you?
Right.
All right. Her shoulder's messed up. So I go to the therapist who works on it, and I'm like, yeah, it's that spot. He's like, so it's the subscapularis, da, 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 da. And I'm like, yeah, what you said, that thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't need to know that.
No.
I just need to say, yeah, that spot on my shoulder, if we don't get it taken care of, I'm going to lose the use of my arm again.
Yeah.
We need to remember that. Yes, we can help communicate the correct terminology, and we can move the public towards that. But if they want to talk to us right now, this very minute, with secondary drowning, then let's talk with them right now about secondary drowning while using the correct terminology.
Yeah, if someone wants to tell me about their daughter who had a near drowning incident, I don't want to stop her and say, no. She had a non-fatal drowning.
I know.
Yeah.
You can feel better. It was a
It was a non-fatal. I know she's hooked up to oxygen and she doesn't talk anymore, but it wasn't a near drowning.
Right.
I think that getting caught up in the weeds of it hurts us more than it helps us a lot of times.
Absolutely, I completely agree. And that's part of what my organization is trying to do, which is to, and there's with the non-fatal drowning. I'm going to forget the organization name again. Make the Minute Matter is one of the sponsors. Justin Semsprot.
With Doctors Without Borders.
Yes, Doctors Without Borders. He also and Collins Hope are now part of a new organization. This is driving me nuts. I just saw something from them yesterday,
they have a great part about secondary, like a website about secondary drowning. That's really good.
And it's
I know what you're talking about.
I apologize, Justin and Alyssa. I just promoted something about you getting votes yesterday on this.
Yeah, great website too.
Yeah, what they did, they've gone to Foot Cone Building and they created this great website and this great information about what is this, and this is what non-fatal drowning is, and this is what it looks like, and this is when you need to get emergency help. They've done a fantastic job of translating it to the public. That's the sort of resource that all of us need to be sharing, because that helps move the conversation so that people start using the correct terminology. But, even emergency room doctors, you talk to emergency room doctors, they're using the wrong terminology.
Yeah.
So if you show up at the hospital, you use whatever terminology is going to get you the medical care you need.
Absolutely.
While we as a field have a responsibility to help move the public to the correct terminology. We use their terminology, and then we also use the correct terminology. Yes, it's known as secondary drowning, but it's non-fatal drowning. It's the process of drowning.
Absolutely.
It's all the process of drowning.
You talk about doctors. I spoke the other day to a pediatrician whose daughter drowned, and she said herself that, she didn't know nearly enough, and she's a doctor, she's a pediatrician. She thought she knew. And, she was woefully ignorant,
Yeah.
So you said the organization that Alyssa and Justin went to was,
it is,
is it a marketing company?
It was Foot Cone Building, the FCB, the
FCB,
big advertising company. They went to them and said, "We're worried about this. We're going to help you out." And I will send you the name of the website. I'm so embarrassed. That's what happens early in the morning. More Than Just Water, something like that. Yeah. But anyways, they said, yes, we will take your concerns about educating the public about what it's really called and what you do, and we will put that into terminology the public can understand. And they've done a brilliant job of it. Absolutely outstanding.
I wanted to know the name of the marketing company because they did a really good job, and
they did a fantastic job. Yeah,
I'm always looking for good resources on that front. So, but you've done a really good job in taking and messaging and kind of distilling it down. And you made a character named Jabari, which Correct. I think ties into putting things in a way people can understand. Mm-hmm. And so Jabari is a lion, right? Am I right?
That's right.
It was a long time ago that I remember seeing him. So it was either a lion or a bear. I figured I had a 50-50 shot, And so tell me about Jabari.
Okay, well, the first thing is interesting is you listen to the public. The first one, which was created with my former business partner who is from Africa. Right. Lion cubs actually don't have a mane, so she wanted it real. But all the feedback I kept going was, oh, it's a cute bear. And I'm like, we got to add a mane because people don't know it's a bear, it's a lion. But one of the two things. One, the rationale behind Jabari, or the reason for Jabari, still stands today. And that's why Make the Minute Matter is really going to be using Jabari aggressively. He is really the crux of our approach. And that is that back to how do you reach children through positive, repetitive, consistent messages until the lessons of how to act are incorporated. Well, and I've written a paper. It's on Scribd. If anybody wants to look, it's called Why Jabari. It's like a hardcore research paper. Dr. Stathis Avramidis, edited it in depth with me, talking about how, like, when you're reaching young children, the best way to reach them is through stories and through animated characters, because children respond to stories, and through animated characters, children relate to them in a different way. And so if anybody's had young children, you see how they relate to, the Sesame Street characters or, the Disney characters. There's just a different way of relating. And so Jabari was created to be the character that teaches water safety correctly. And we know that children can't all do it, and all children can't act well all the time. And children actually know that about themselves. So Jabari has a whole host of friends. If you go to jabariofthewater.com, and you can read about all of his different friends, Awande and Jabulani and Gugu, and they all have different personality traits so that children can find the personality traits that they relate to. They are like, yeah, I'm kind of that. I'm like that character. But then they can also be constantly trying to be safe around water like Jabari. So Jabari, though, is then the visual. Jabari is the main one. And the point behind that is that whatever our awareness and education programs are, and Jabari has to be incorporated into anybody who gets funding for the skills-based training programs because it provides the visual prompt for behavior. So you can't expect a child to remember stuff, especially when they're 1 and 2 and 3, with all the time. And so if you have Jabari on your fence or Jabari on your swimsuit or Jabari, near the water, then the visual prompt of the correct behavior will help the child remember, I'm not supposed to go near the fence without my mom or dad or my grandparents. I'm not supposed to go in the water without this. I'm not supposed to do that, or I am supposed to do this. Jabari said I needed to wear a life jacket if I'm on a boat, so I'm going to wear my Jabari life jacket. And so he's not just a cute character. In fact, I hope he's cute. I'm actually very attached to him, but he's far more than that. He is a way of marketing water safety and the correct behaviors around water in a way that reinforces the behavior and actually acts as a visual prompt for when a child is excited and is more likely to forget. They're going to have that visual prompt of, oh, you're right, I can't run in until I have a parent.
And what has Jabari appeared in so far? Jabari
has been kind of hanging out, not doing much. He's been he's got an awesome website. I encourage people to go visit it. That was one of my earlier attempts, actually. I've been constantly, almost from the beginning that I've been in this, been working to draw attention to all the programs that are out there because there are so many amazing people and programs out there. And so the Jabari, if you go onto the Jabari website, the blog, for a period, I had people saying, write about what you do. So we've got the Kauai lifeguards out there. That was one of my favorite ones, their program of putting the rescue tubes out there. So different ways of trying to draw attention to build a community. That's the biggest thing I want to do is build this community of people and organizations who will share each other's information. Beyond that, Jabari has been in a holding pattern waiting for Make the Minute Matter. Make the Minute Matter, as I said, was developed only after I had done significant research in what needs to be done, how we need to approach it. I also wrote a book called Ignite Changes, How to Use Social Marketing to Change Behavior. And that's at ignitechanges.com. And ignitechanges.com is it is a template for Make the Minute Matter. It was my way to go, all right, I've connected 8-9 years worth of research in the field and talked to so many people around the world about what they do and what's working and what challenges they encounter in the different cultures. And when I say cultures, I don't even just mean going to Bangladesh for different cultures. I mean the culture of Chicago versus Florida versus Texas versus California. You've got, and within the African American community and the Hispanic community and the Native American community and the white population and the recent immigrants, you've got subcultures all over the place. And so I took all that information and wrote an outline of this is everything that would need to be included. And then I wrote the book out, kind of as a way of getting my head straight, but also because the technique can be used in basically any social change environment, whether you're working on reducing tobacco use or reducing drunk driving or tackling obesity. Those techniques of social marketing that I'm using with Make the Minute Matter to end drowning, to change behavior positively, can be used in anything else. And so Jabari's been hanging out looking adorable on his website, and now he's had a nice rest and he is going to go out there and work.
Nice.
He's had a free ride for long enough.
He has to go earn his keep. So what is in the works for, Make the Minute Matter for the next 12 months? What's your plan to get started?
We're launching. So the biggest thing that I'm focusing on now, and so I'm sure I've started up a couple of different businesses, starting up a nonprofit. It's a couple more different hoops that you have to jump through. So we just finished doing our fundraising registration all over the country. Okay. So I'm starting to pitch pilot programs and also starting to specifically focus on fundraising so that we can get this off the ground. And then continuing my usual work of networking and finding resources so that one of the first things we will be doing as soon as money starts coming through the door, we'll be focusing some on awareness, but we will also be immediately getting money out the door to skills-based training programs. Because I don't think that kids need to keep drowning just while I get my awareness program going. We've got programs that work.
What do those programs look like?
Skills-based. When I say skills-based training program, I mean swimming lessons, survival swim lessons, CPR lessons, lifeguard training. And if somebody can pitch something else that sounds like it's skills-based training, more than willing to listen to them. But it comes down to what we know works. We know that swimming lessons and survival swim lessons reduce drowning rates. In Bangladesh, it was shown that survival swim reduces drowning rates by 93%. That is a good return on investment.
Absolutely.
Lifeguard training. If you swim near a lifeguard, your chances of drowning go down to 1 in 18 million. So having lifeguards around, that is a good way of reducing drowning. And CPR. We know that you can have a non-fatal drowning accident turn into not having brain damage or minimizing the effect if you have CPR with breaths at the scene. And so those skills-based that we know that we actually have, research backing up, yes, these things actually reduce drowning. That's what we're focusing on.
I talked to somebody yesterday, actually, and I heard an idea I'd never heard before. Her name is Melon Dash, which is the greatest name ever. And she focuses on training adults how to swim.
Right.
And she believes, and I tend to agree with her, that training adults how to swim helps children be safe, because adults know how to swim, teach their children how to swim, and you have this multi-generational approach as well.
Absolutely.
And so the way she's attacking water safety and keeping children safe is by making sure adults know how to swim, because there's a lot of them that don't. Yeah. And, I thought that was a really interesting way of attacking it,
Yeah, Melon's awesome, and she's done fantastic work, and I agree. It's interesting. Christina Fonfe in Sri Lanka had the same thing. Her, after the tsunami, the 2004 tsunami killed 500,000 people, 80% of them were women and children because they couldn't swim.
Right.
I mean, you can actually survive a tsunami, but if you don't know how to swim, you have no chance. So she went over and thought, well, I'm going to teach the women to swim because then they're going to teach the children. And she actually ended up focusing on young women who weren't mothers yet. And it's had enormous success, but it's the same mentality. If you teach the adults, and frequently if you teach the women, they're going to teach the children. They're going to see that it's important.
Yeah, because I think swim schools are similar to the statistics about people who have gone to college, right? If you've gone to college, there's a much higher chance that your kids will, Yeah. And I think that adults who know how to swim have a much higher likelihood of teaching their kids to swim.
I don't know the statistics, but I'm more than willing to bet you are absolutely right on that.
It feels right,
It does feel right. Sometimes you don't need statistics. Sometimes common sense will help.
If it's the same for college, it's probably the same for swim as well. So what do you think other organizations should be doing to help the cause?
Share. Everybody share. Please share. When I did my Rip Current event,
right.
When there's something like that out there, don't be afraid to put other people's information on your website or on your Facebook or on your Twitter or on your Instagram. Say, hey, this is what's happening here. It does not take away from your market share. It builds it, because people's mentality is, oh, I want to be involved in something that's popular. I want to be hanging with the good kids, the good group. And so the more we share what each other is doing, the more we create a culture of, I really want to know about this. And then we have people coming to us going, I want to know about water safety. I want to learn about drowning prevention. I want to learn how to take swim lessons. I want to learn about, CPR. I want to make sure I'm swimming near a lifeguard. Hey, my community, how come we don't have lifeguards on duty more often? Yes, I'm willing to support that. And that only comes about if we are willing to share. So go back to preschool when they said, you got to share. There's everything you know in life you learned in preschool. Sharing. That's the big one. That's my biggest message. You've got to share.
Well,
Send it to me. I will share. I will share whatever you've got.
Well, that makes me feel good, because we share everybody's stuff all the time. So I'm glad
Which
that
is awesome.
We're doing that already, at least,
You and the American Sailing Association.
Is that it? We're the two?
Yeah. There are others. I'm leaving some people out, right. I know. But amazingly enough, though, out of the 350 organizations globally that we looked at to see what their social media presence was, the American Sailing Association, which is not on anybody's radar in the drowning prevention community.
Nope, never heard of them. Yeah.
They are awesome at sharing things from other organizations. And they have a really good following because of it. There's the other attack. Share because it's the right thing to do, but share because then your audience trusts you more. Your audience will come to you to see everything because you're sharing really good information. So you increase your statistics. So it's a win-win.
Right. It works.
It works.
It's worked for us,
Yeah.
So, I think it's good advice, and I think it's good for people to do,
I know. And I have to thank you for being so willing to share and to get out there and to have me on today, along with everybody else you're interviewing, because I think having that willingness to be open, to learn, to share what everybody's doing does create the community. And the community is what's going to get us the momentum, to get the recognition, to get the funding, to be able to make changes.
Yeah, I think you need that. I think you need a lot of voices, not to use the word behind your head there, to make this, really a reality and to move the needle in a way that makes sense.
Yes.
I think, as you've known and experienced over the last 11 years, you've been doing it in the 20 years that I've been doing this, that there's a lot of people, not to be a pun, but a lot of people treading water,
Yeah.
And very little forward momentum, and I've been a part of a few nonprofits and on the board of a handful. And, I'm not anymore because nothing was happening,
Yeah.
I run a business and I expect the things I'm in to run like a business. And when I see, endless meetings and these, 2-hour conference calls once a month and zero being accomplished,
Right.
I just can't do that. It's painful to sit in, and, I have better things to do that could, for me and for the cause, so.
Yes.
And there's a lot of people in those organizations who think that they're doing something, which is probably the biggest travesty is, that they're spending, 20 hours a month on this cause, thinking that it's going towards, making a difference. And the reality is they're doing very, very little,
Right. Right. Which is sad because there's so much talent and there's so much passion in our field. It never fails to amaze me, the positive energy in the field. And that's because we work with water.
Sure.
I mean, I would say water is used in all the world's main religions as a cleansing, as a powerful force. Anybody who's taken a bath, taken a shower, had a glass of water, knows how life-giving, how powerful that is. And so the people within the drowning prevention community have that sense. There's this palpable, happiness or a sense of peace and calm. So share it.
Yeah.
Share it. People they want to do well. They want to change. They want people to have that positive relationship with water and to not drown, to be able to enjoy the water without drowning. That's what I see the most, is wanting to share that. And so let's create a community where we're sharing that, not just with our community, but with everyone.
Well, I think that's a perfect way to wrap this up. That's awesome. Thank you. Where can people find out more about you and Make the Minute Matter and Jabari and anything else you're doing?
Well, first place, again, thank you so much for having me on today. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, and I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
To find out more, go to maketheminutemmatter.org. You can also, you'll find Jabari there. You can link through, but that's also jabariofthewater.com. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Pinterest. We're looking into Instagram.
I got Instagram. Instagram is important.
Yeah, I know. But, I've got researchers going like, all right, what's our position out there? What do we do?
Right.
And then also I've done a lot of writing. If people are interested in looking at improving their business, improving their approach, improving how they relate with their target audiences, I've written blogs for a couple of years. That's at RebeccaWareRobinson.com on the blog. And there's a lot of good, basically you can get two master's degrees right there delivered to your inbox if you just go back and look through a couple of those. So, but again, most of all, if you're interested in being part of a community, if I'm not sharing your stuff already, reach out to me at Rebecca@maketheminuteMatter.org. And if I haven't met you yet, I would love to meet you. Like I said, my favorite thing with this is the people I know around the world. It really does make my work deeply rewarding every single day.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. And I'm glad you did this with me. And I hope we talk again really soon.
My pleasure. And again, thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rebecca.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.